My name's Jacob. I'm from Montreal, and as you can probably guess, my favorite prioritization hack is data clinics. Today, I'll be talking about lessons in prioritization, how to balance quick questions against your team's long-term plans. So, as an analytics engineer, there's a lot of things I love about the technical challenges in the work and how to get that work done. What's a lot more challenging, however, is prioritizing what work to do. When it comes to determining what work to do, there's a lot of different questions at stake, and sometimes you need a process to figure that out. So my big ambitious promise for you today is that in the same way that dbt is a paradigm shifting technology for data teams, data clinics are a paradigm shifting process for data teams. So first, before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a step back and let's think about why we even have to choose in the first place. We have to choose which tasks we're working on because there's different understandings of value and there's different understandings of what the priorities should be for a data team. A lot of data teams think that they're growing up from the backlog when they move on to the roadmap, but I want to think about that a little bit more closely and break down the benefits of both systems and figure out how possibly a hybrid system between the two is best. On the left, we have the backlog. The backlog is the most organic way of collecting these requests. They come in as people are asking them. There's another one right there. And it's based on a short-term need, often super not well planned out, but it's what the person needs in that moment. This is a very inclusive way of collecting requests. These are often those quick questions. Somebody saying, hey, a quick question about this data. Is it really correct? Quick question about this dashboard. Can we add a new chart? Can we modify something? These are things that are organically showing up within your organization. A lot of teams will go away from that backlog system and move on to a roadmap system. The roadmap system is seen as a much more long-term way of prioritizing work. You take a closed room discussion, you determine what are the possibilities, what are the possible things to prioritize, and you determine what to work on and in what order. This allows you to estimate things. It allows you to cascade various different projects together. Project 1 leads into project 2, into project 3. This allows you to get a lot more done. Clearly, we have two very different systems here, the backlog and the roadmap. I don't think it's so simple as just growing up from the backlog to the roadmap, so let's dig into it a little bit more to figure out what's going on. So with the roadmap, let's talk about examples. Let's imagine we're an e-commerce company and we have kind of the standard organizational structure. Our customer success team has a request for us and it fits pretty well within the roadmap. So they want an NPS control center dashboard comprised of 4 different steps. So the 4 different steps, cascading in the last infographic, are expanding the data pipeline to incorporate the new data. This might be a Singer tab or working with Fivetran. We're going to need to create the new dbt models. We're going to need to create a Tableau dashboard or whatever your BI tool is. And then finally, we're going to have to train the customer success team on how to use the dashboard. It's a big project. It's multi-stage. It's not going to be very valuable if you can only execute on one of those individual tasks. But once you have done all of the work, it's going to provide a lot more depth. It's going to provide very clear value to that team. On the other side of things, with the quick questions, with the backlog, we also have a lot of value being produced for different teams, just value of a very different type. Here's another request from customer success. Customer success team wants to understand order volume on weekends compared to weekdays. The value here is really clear. It's going to help them better schedule how to have their staff work on weekdays compared to weekends. The marketing team wants to better understand return customers, particularly what they bought in their first order. The value here is that they're going to be able to better target these returning customers to figure out what they're most likely to buy. The product team wants to understand click rates on their product carousel, banner 1 compared to banner 2 and banner 3. Teaching them how to do this has clear value for them as well, because if you teach them how to fish, they'll be able to kind of check back in with these metrics as they continue to make changes. So, digging into this a little bit more, let's think about the product from both of these worlds. With dbt and using the dbt mindset, you can realize that it's not just the work that you're doing. It's not just the analysis that you're providing. Often you're creating models that are going to persist beyond the original analysis. So what is the product? What is the infrastructure that's developed on these roadmap tasks compared to some of these backlog tasks? Well, with the roadmap, we already saw that it's obviously a much greater depth of reporting. You previously didn't support those data sources. Previously, you didn't have those data models. And now you have much more expertise in a new area, more specific models for more specific use cases. Documentation, unfortunately for this, is often just for that trained audience. but it allows them to do a lot more than they were able to before any of this existed. If we compare this with the backlog, there's the opposite side. So there's a much greater breadth of reporting. People are asking about a lot of these, very similar models. They're asking about orders, they're asking about users, they're asking about the fulfillment metrics from some of those orders. This is going to be a handful of DBT models that can accommodate intentionally more generic use cases. Hopefully, you're also going to have better documentation than before, and it's going to be great for beginner audiences. What I'm trying to tease out here is the nuances of the different types of value that can be produced in these two worlds. The breadth of the backlog is very valuable. The depth of the roadmap is also valuable, but of a different type. So where does that leave us in terms of advantages? We're talking about how the growing up story doesn't really make sense. There's clear advantages to both. To summarize, for the roadmap, it's the only way to get big multi-stage projects done. It makes estimating deliverables possible. You're able to plan them, cascading one into the next. And it also, very importantly, makes prioritizing behind the scenes work possible. If you're thinking about, just like in the JetBlue case, thinking about migrating to Snowflake, migrating to a whole new tech stack, this is going to have to be prioritized beforehand. You can't just kind of work on this in an ad hoc way. If you're thinking about the backlog, on the other hand, there's tons of other advantages. So anybody can add to it. It's inclusive of all potential stakeholders. It's also naturally, because of that, a living list of the priorities. You don't have to worry about the cadence of your prioritization cycle messing up with what is currently in demand. You're always going to know because people will be able to add to the backlog. They'll be able to ask their quick questions as they come up. Small projects that are game changers for stakeholders also get to see the light of day when they come up in a backlog. If you have a small team like a talent team, if you have a small team like the finance team perhaps, they may not have a dedicated analyst, but by making a quick question, by putting something into the backlog, they get to really unblock themselves. They get to really access the leverage of what the data team and what the analytics team can do for them. So now that we've thought about these different ways of prioritizing, thought about why you prioritize, what kind of value is produced by different types of work, let's get to a problem statement. So how can teams get the advantages of both long-term thinking and short-term thinking, the roadmap and the quick questions of the backlog? What I'm proposing is data clinics. What I'm proposing is a hybrid system effectively. So the solution, a data clinic is a time of day when you set aside the plan and welcome walk-in requests with the goal of providing insight and teaching, but not perfection. So a data clinic, also just to clarify, could be called in office hours, could be called whatever you want. What you're really just trying to say is that you're setting aside some time to open the doors to your patients or to your walk-ins and saying, okay, how can I help you today? In this infographic, I'm showing you just an example of what a standard week might look like. The roadmap is clearly the more important one that we can see here because in my week, I still need to accomplish those huge tasks. But I want to be very explicit about making sure that these walk-in requests are welcome and that they have time of day so that they don't just get relegated to the side. That's the first part of our definition here. So it's all about setting aside the plan and welcoming those walk-in requests. We're saying that they're both important. The roadmap, setting aside the plan, is very important. It's most of the gray space there, but we want to make explicit time for the walk-in requests. The second part of the definition is about what you're trying to achieve with this time. So the goal of providing insight and teaching and not perfection is to highlight the 80-20 rule. With this, we're really zooming in on the idea of a quick question. We don't want it to balloon into a roadmap style task. The 80-20 rule tells us that in 20% of the work, you can get 80% of the benefit. The remaining 20% of the benefit is going to come from the other 80% of the work, and that's much more the world of the roadmap work. When it comes to this, you want to focus on trying to answer the question, to unblock the individual, to teach them how to do it themselves, to really try to produce some of that value and to start the discussion, start it rolling from there. A great way to make sure that something doesn't balloon is by making a task to follow up with it, by moving part of it into the roadmap, but we'll discuss that more in a little bit. So coming back to my big ambitious promise, DBT is foundational to scaling a data stack. Well, once again, what I'm promising is that data clinics are foundational to scaling a data team. Okay, so that's a lot of theoretical conversation about what is a data clinic, how is it going to help you. Let's actually do a data clinic together, this hypothetical one for our e-commerce company, to see how it would actually function. So we've got a couple of requests that are going to come in. We can see this DBT model on the right-hand side. And I'm going to walk through how you can run an effective data clinic, how it can also help, bolster your orders table, bolster this data mart table, and we'll see how the knowledge can be built up throughout this process. So our first request is from our fulfillment team. Are we fulfilling orders more quickly now than before? And does that vary between fulfillment centers? So if I look on the right-hand side, it's not a very complex orders table. It's great. It's got a nice simple name. It's perfect for a less technical person, but we're going to have to do some more denormalization. So I spent 30 minutes with this request. I find out what exactly they're looking for, and I say, oh yeah, we actually do have a table that I can join in. I join in the order fulfillment metrics, and we're able to denormalize some of that information. I can see that I have the fulfillment center name, I have the time to fulfill, and I have when it was fulfilled. Using this information and using Looker or Tableau, I can teach the person how to start doing the analysis and leave it at that. I'm not going to do the analysis. I'm going to assume, my fulfillment team is very expert. They can take this from here. I'm really trying to execute on that 80-20 rule. So now what's our second request? Our second request is also from the fulfillment team. So are certain products being fulfilled at certain fulfillment centers? Okay, really interesting question, and something that we can now answer because of this denormalization of our orders table. Now that we've already introduced those fulfillment metrics, I can use the fulfillment center name as well as the product names that were originally in the model to figure out, the count of products per fulfillment center. Also, if we include in our discussion some of the longitudinal aspects, I can talk about, okay, what's possible? How can we look at this over time? Should you be using fulfilled at? Should you be using confirmed at? We can include that in our teaching around this request. Moving on, what's our next request? Okay, another request in our data clinic is, what are our NPS scores across different products? Okay, so another good question, and another good question to include in our orders table. It's not there right now, but I know that we have satisfaction survey data. So if I do some more denormalization, include those client satisfaction surveys, I can see that we're increasing the value. We're increasing the organizational knowledge about orders by denormalizing this table further. I've introduced the NPS score, NPS category, comment, and when we received the NPS. It's all at the bottom of the model there, and I'm able to answer this question for our product design team. Once again, it's really about laying the groundwork for them, trying to answer the question quickly, and saying, here are the tools to do the remaining analysis yourself. What is our last request? Okay, so last request number 4 is also from the customer success team. How can I see our most recent NPS comments for certain products? So if I'm looking through here, I can see, once again, I have the NPS comment and I have some of these different timestamps. This is a question that, thanks to previous denormalization, is now possible. By, building up the knowledge, by slowly accumulating knowledge, organizational knowledge around the orders table, we're making it easier to respond to these data clinic questions. We're building up knowledge so that people are able to, start doing analyses, start sharing knowledge within their own teams. So that was a quick run through of a hypothetical data clinic. Hopefully it gave you a better understanding of how it might actually work within your organization. But let's get back to the theoretical side to it. So let's think about, what are the specific reasons why you should start running a data clinic at your organization? Well, the first one is what we've really been talking about this whole time. They provide you with high leverage, low complexity opportunities. When we think about these two systems, the backlog compared to the roadmap is providing you high leverage opportunities, but with much higher complexity. You really have to make sure that everything is well planned out. These data clinic requests, on the other hand, are much lower complexity opportunities because it's often the low-hanging fruit. Somebody has never really worked with the data team, something doesn't exist, they're just trying to make a small modification, but it's very high leverage. You know that it's valuable because somebody is coming to you asking you explicitly for it. Another great reason is that it allows you to time box interruptions. I know for me personally, this is super important. If I want to be able to get my roadmap work done, I need to know that I can tell somebody, your short-term request still matters, your quick question still matters. If I can time box it, it helps me and it helps the stakeholder. By having explicit times of day when somebody can get help, they can go to a Slack channel, leave their question, and know that it will get answered. Hopefully you can get rid of the DMs and all of the pestering about, hey, have you had time to answer this? I don't mean to be a bother. With time boxing interruptions and having a system in place, it puts the stress into one category and removes it from both the stakeholder and the data team member. Data clinics also create a great feedback loop for data needs. What I was mentioning before with the difference between the roadmap and the backlog, the roadmap is determining what to work on a set cadence. If it's yearly, if it's monthly, if it's quarterly, whatever it may be, you are missing out on the feedback that you're going to get throughout that cadence. If you're operating on a quarterly basis, for example, the confidence that you have in your plan in month 1 is going to be much different than the confidence you might have in your plan in month 3. Both of these systems matter, but by having a system like data clinics that is a rolling feedback loop is a great supplement. They also encourage simpler maintainability in the data pipeline. This one is a bit more nuanced, but we were able to see it with our model before. If you're trying to answer data questions effectively in your data clinic, you're going to have to build institutional knowledge around your data. By having a table like orders that everybody can learn about, you're going to increase data literacy and you're going to make it simpler to maintain by having so many questions answered with one data set. It's not going to work for everything. When you think about the depth, there are still certain problems that have to be solved that way. But if you can think about breadth, if you can think about teaching everybody this core level of knowledge, it's going to be much simpler to maintain than if you're building individual models for all of your teams. And lastly, when it comes to important reasons why you should run a data clinic, it's a more inclusive way of serving your team. With roadmaps, there are often closed room discussions. When it comes to determining what to work on, it's a process that unfortunately has to be limited to a select number of people. By implementing data clinics on top of it, you introduce a more inclusive way, a way that is open to everybody for serving your team as well. That's a bit about why. Let's also talk about how you can actually run an effective data clinic. So the first thing is you want to make them frequent, and if possible, make them daily. If you're making them frequent, you're making sure that people know that it's an institution. It's something that's going to keep running. It's something where they can always depend on it. It allows you to, not have to worry about, hey, I'm going to be running a data clinic next week. Hey, I'm going to be running a data clinic later this month. This is something where you want your stakeholders and you want yourself to be able to depend on this process. If it's not daily, you're going to lose out on some of the value. A lot of people have time-sensitive quick questions, time-sensitive requests. Making them much more frequent will make sure that you deliver on the value and also make it front of mind for people. Secondly, make them open for everyone at your company. When I was talking about the inclusivity, this comes hand in hand with it. By starting off with a Slack channel or by starting off with a forum or something like that, you can really democratize the process. What we're trying to say is, in contrast to the roadmap, you don't need to know about everything that the data team is trying to accomplish. You just need to know what your request is, what your business question is, and ask for help from the data team. You're really focusing on the quick question. You want to make sure that it's open for everyone. An important part of this is allowing for asynchronous as well as synchronous requests. Asynchronous is important for it to be inclusive, but synchronous is often important for it to actually be effective at teaching. So asynchronous, people have difficult agendas and schedules sometimes. So it's important to allow for somebody to leave that question and you to just respond over Slack. Synchronous, it's a great way to say, okay, they left you their question on Slack. Let's follow up. Let's schedule some time. By scheduling that time, you can make it a teachable moment. So, hey, please show up during the first 15 minutes of my data clinic and let's talk about this. In those first 15 minutes, by doing it synchronously, you can make sure that you're really teaching the person how to solve this problem for themselves in the future. Also, super important to respect the time limit. When it comes to managing these, you have to make sure that we're keeping both of those systems in mind, the roadmap and the backlog. You can't start letting them blend together, and you should be pretty cautious about making sure to make a task if it needs to be a roadmap task. A data clinic is a great time to de-risk things and just discuss. You don't have to write any code or run any queries. A data clinic can just be advising if it needs to. And then lastly, share the responsibility across the data team. This is a super important way of producing value for your team. So don't think about it as a chore. Think about it just in the same way that you think about your roadmap. This is a way to produce value. It's a way to serve your team. It should be shared by the team so that everybody is a part of this process of building up more knowledge. So coming back to it, have we answered our question? How can teams get the advantages of both? The data clinic is a hybrid system. It's trying to blend both of them together. And hopefully by walking through this, you can see that there are a lot of advantages. But also don't take my word for it. So what are some results from a recent organization that I was with that implemented data clinics? Well, by the numbers, about 80% of sprint points were delivered. So when we talk about the roadmap, we were still able to execute. On the other side, up to 8 data clinic requests were answered per day. So sometimes this would be multiple people running data clinics, but what we're saying is, long-term value is still being produced while we're answering these quick questions. Another side benefit of this was that 10 times as many weekly self-serve users were showing up on our BI tool on Metabase. This meant that not only were we producing long-term value and short-term value, we also got the positive externality of more people becoming data literate, more people using our tools. From the feedback, the more qualitative feedback, we had stakeholders feeling more empowered and informed. It was their first opportunity to work on analyses themselves. And ultimately, a lot of people were excited to learn new analytical skills to complement subject matter expertise. Somebody who was a part of the talent team got to have these discussions about medians and percentiles. It really gave them a leveling up in their skill set and in their confidence about doing their own analyses. In terms of Metabase skills, we also saw that there was a shift in the distribution. We had a lot of people that had never used it. We had a lot of people that were only using questions and kind of like looks that were made by other people. But slowly, we had people shifting to the side of the power users. We had more power users, more people editing pre-made questions. What we saw was a shift in terms of the expertise. So really coming back to it and just trying to wrap up, a data clinic is a time of day when you set aside the plan and welcome walk-in requests. This is not meant to be something that really changes the way that you do all of your work. It's meant to be a stopgap solution, a hybrid system for allowing both of these great systems to work. Your goal is to provide insight and teaching, not perfection. In running these data clinics, hopefully it's going to be an effective way for you to serve your team. Thank you for listening to my talk.